And we have first starting off, lead off, is Miguel Xavier from an International Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory in Portugal. Is that right?
That's correct.
And he's going to tell us all about his work in microfluidics for complete simulation of the human gastrointestinal tract.
So hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction. And thanks for the organization. It's really a pleasure to be able to be here and talk to you about my work. So I'm going to tell you about the development of a gastrointestinal tract on a ship. And what's the motivation for doing this? So when we are developing new drugs or foods, we want to be able to test their bioaccessibility, which is the fraction of the compound that is available for intestinal absorption following digestion. And also its bioavailability, which is the fraction of the compound that is found in circulation following intestinal absorption and metabolism in the liver. Now, to do this, there is an array of methods, and some of them are very simple, like benchtop protocols, where you just mix your sample with a bunch of reagents and you let it incubate for a few hours. And there's other more complex methods, like the one on the right here. And this, I can tell you, is pretty much the size of a human being, so it's quite huge. They do offer more physiological relevance, but they're very bulky and they use a lot of sample. And a lot of sample is not always available when you're, for example, developing new nanoformulations, as we do in our lab. And more recently, there have been efforts to developing miniaturized models based on microfluidics, and they do work, but I also believe there's still a lot of room for improvement, and that's what we're trying to do. In terms of intestinal absorption, Andreas actually already showed a very similar image to this one in the morning. So you've all heard of in vitro models based on transwall inserts. You've all heard, of course, of in vivo models. What I wanted to call your attention to is actually organ on chip, because I do think that they offer more physiological relevance than the in vitro models. And they can circumvent the issues with interspecies of variability that are associated with the use of in vivo models, because in organ on chip, we can actually use human cells. So I do think they're part of the future for doing intestinal absorption assessments. Now, for our digestion chip, we set a list of requirements. So we wanted it to be miniaturized, specifically because we want to be able to use very small amounts of sample. We want to have automated control of pH and temperature. So we want minimal user interface in our device. And we want to assure constant mixing because it's going to help with our reaction rates. Also, we wanted to include dynamic features. So from those complex models that I showed you before that are called the dynamic models, we want also to include some of those features. And these are, for example, the gradual acidification of the stomach content, the gradual addition of enzymes through digestion, and also something that is called gastric emptying, which simulates a lot better what happens in our stomach when the pylorus opens gradually and lets batches of what's being digested in the stomach to the intestinal phase and not all at once. So this is the design that we came up with. So you can see that we've got two separate chambers, a stomach chamber and an intestinal chamber. In the two chambers, we're going to be adding our sample and simulated salivary, gastric, or intestinal fluids. And we have the two chambers sensorized with temperature sensors, which are going to be working in parallel with heating elements to bring the temperature up to 37 degrees. We also have pH electrodes, which are working in a feedback loop with two syringe pumps, two for each chamber, that can add either HCl or an AOH to bring the pH up and down as required. And finally, you've got a peristaltic pump connecting the two chambers that allows us to do that gastric emptying that I told you before. In terms of fabrication, we opted for a layer-by-layer approach using PMMA sheets that have been machined either by CNC or laser cut. And these images is just to show you the different elements that we are using. So temperature sensors are actually commercial. We are using an insulated nichrome wire to provide the heating. And for pH, we've got iridium oxide electrodes on titanium for our sensing electrode and a silver-silver chloride in 3 molar KCl for our reference electrode. This is just to show you our peristaltic pump working. So this is an hybrid between PMMA and PDMS. So we've got a very thin membrane of PDMS that can be deflected with pressure. And we are able to pass from the stomach chamber to the intestinal chamber at a flow rate of 100 microliters per minute, which is plenty because we start with 2 mils of sample and we don't want to transfer all at once. So this is more than enough for our requirements. And this is just to show you some of the data of the device working. So we used a casein molecule that has been fluorescently labeled, but the fluorophores are quenched when the molecule is in its native state. As it gets digested, it fluoresces, and the fluorescence is proportional to the extent of digestion. So what you can see here, when we compare the on-chip data, which is the orange triangles with the blue rhombuses, which are the static protocol, the gold standard currently used. And they match quite nicely, which was really good. And also the kinetics, you can see that the fluorescence goes up in the gastric phase, then kind of reaches a plateau. And then in the intestinal digestion phase, when new enzymes come in that can act on different sites of the casein molecule, it goes back up again until it kind of, you can see that will reach a plateau eventually again. So this is working pretty nicely. Now, moving on to our gut chip. So this is our cell-based module. So we're doing digestion in one device and we're doing intestinal absorption in a different device. This is the design. So we've got two channels, a bottom and a top channel. And then we fabricate a PDMS membrane by spin coating PDMS on top of an array of micropillars, very much like we do in the emulate devices. And we're able to obtain these 20 to 30 micron thick PDMS membranes with well-connecting pores to both sides of the device. Then we sandwich the membrane between the two channels, and this is a 3D representation of it. We then functionalize the devices and we coat them with extracellular matrix proteins, in this case, a mixture of matrigel and collagen, and we sieve a co-culture of CACO2 and HT29 MTX cells, so enterocytes and goblet cells that are there to produce mucus. And after allowing the cells to adhere for 24 hours, we turn on the flow rates at 120 microliters an hour for 7 days. Then, of course, we wanted to compare our cells growing on chip with the transwell grown cells, and these are cells grown on transwells, both after 7 days and after 21 days. And what I wanted to point out is that they form a very flat monolayer, so they don't form any 3D structures as you would expect from intestinal epithelium. On the gut chip, however, as you can see, both from the orthogonal views and from this video here, where I'm just, we are moving up and down through the Z stack, you can see that there is a very nice three-dimensional structure that really resembles gut villi. And this maximum projection seen from the top, I think, also shows very nicely the three-dimensionality of the tissue. We then started running some functional assays on the device, so testing actually intestinal absorption, and we did this using a small fluorescent molecule, lucifer yellow. And we disrupted the barrier by using EDTA, so it's an ion chelator is going to disrupt adherence junctions between cells. And as you can see, in the three conditions where we used EDTA, both on inserts at 721 days and on the gut chip, compared to the control where we did nothing, the apparent permeability of lucifer yellow was a lot higher. And it didn't change much between the transwells and the gut chip, which I think could be anticipated because if the barrier is disrupted, it is disrupted, so it shouldn't vary much. However, what I wanted to show is that when we did nothing to the cell, so in our control settings, the apparent permeability of lucifer yellow on the gut chip was a lot higher than on the inserts. And this at first might sound that it's not a good thing, but actually it is because it matches a lot better the apparent permeability of the same molecule ex vivo. It's also been reported that CACO2 cells grown on transwell inserts form a barrier that is too tight. So this is actually a good thing. Then, when you want to bring the two modules together, so the digestion chip and the gut chip, we need to be sure that the digestion fluids are not toxic to the cells that we are using. But the truth is that they are. As you can see from the data here on the screen, not as much on the gastric digestion, and this is because the enzymes in the gastric digestion, they are active at lower pH, so they will not be active at physiological pH that we use for cell culture, but the ones that are using the intestinal digestion, they are quite toxic, even after diluting them 1 to 10. So we tried to find what we could do to block the action of these enzymes. So we used a commercial protease blocker called PEFOBlock. Just using PEFOBlock was not enough, so we still diluted it further down, and we also tried to find what was the contact time that we could use to avoid toxicity to the cells. We found out that the 1 to 6 dilution and keeping contact to a maximum of 4 hours was good enough, and that's what we finally did. So we kept our control condition, our EDTA condition, and then we incubated the cells with the products from the digestion, and we also added lucifer yellow to the mixture. What you can see here is actually that the apparent permeability of lucifer yellow went down. I'm not entirely sure if this was a response to the stimulus that the cells were exposed to that caused a tightening of the barrier, or just because it could be that there's so many proteins on the digestion fluids that they absorbed on top of the cells and limited the diffusion of lucifer yellow. But what's important actually is that the products from digestion did not disrupt the barrier. So we are finally able to do digestion on chip and then use the same fluids from digestion to run them on the gut chip, and in this way start to simulate, let's say, a total gastrointestinal tract on chip. And I think that's it. Yeah, so I wanted just to thank all the people that participated in this work and also the funding agencies. all of you for your attention. And as someone did before me today, if someone has a paper who wants to submit to our special issue on micro machines, we can actually offer a full APC waiver for submissions until the end of next month. So thank you very much.
All right, we have some time for questions.
Hey, Ani Basu from University of Chicago. Great system. I have a couple of questions. One is, do you have enough mucins covering your cells? Are your goblet cells actively producing mucin? And if they are they providing some sort of protection against the strong pH conditions? And the second one is, do you have a disease model for this?
Yeah, so the first question, they are producing enough mucin, so we stained them with Alshan blue. I didn't show it today, but we did check that. They do offer some protection because when we do the studies with the CACO2 on their own, they are more susceptible than when we do the co-culture with the HT29s. You asked about the pH. We don't do the cultures with low pH. So we don't have cells on our digestion chip. We only have them on the gut chip. So on the gut chip, we are still using the normal culture media pH, which will be around 7 or 7.4. So that doesn't apply there. Disease models, not yet, but actually we are now starting to work with primary cells from samples that we're getting from the hospital. So it's all patients undergoing surgery to remove tumors, but we get only the healthy tissue. So we're still optimizing that to get the primary cells growing on chip. We are getting there, actually, which is really exciting. When we do that, we can start selecting patients with specific diseases and then trying to do some personalized medicine studies on chip, which is really, for me, the final goal. So we are in the food group where I work. That's why I'm doing all this work with digestion, but I'm actually a little bit biased towards the health arena. So that's something that I want to look at as well. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question? Are you planning to add microbes also into the system?
Yeah, of course. They are super relevant, right? We want to include microbiotas. That includes further challenges because the majority of microbes that are resident in the gut, they will be anaerobic. So there needs to be some way of getting hypoxia in the devices. Our device for now is PDMS based, which is super gas permeable. So that's going to be another challenge, but it's something that we want to do and include as well. Yeah.
If I was not mistaken, you're doing the small intestine, which is that also anaerobic or?
Good point. I think the majority is still anaerobic. If someone knows better, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think, yes, I think it is.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have a question. Maybe you said it, but I didn't catch it. Why is it that you have three-dimensional structures in the microchannel and not in the transfer device?
Yeah, I think it's all to do with flow because we did cultures on the chip without flow, just with static cultures, and we also obtained a flat monolayer. With flow, which adds the shear stress, I think that gives enough stimulus to the cells to form these kind of three dimensions.
So it's not a mechanical stretching.
We don't include any mechanical stretching like they do in the emulate devices. I kind of have a theory about that. I think, well, in the emulate devices, the first devices were for lung chip, right? And you stretched it because you have the alveoli, and that's what actually happens in the alveoli. But in the gut, I don't think the same applies. It is peristaltic, but it's more contraction than it is expansion, isn't it? So yeah, I think there should be some kind of mechanical stimulus. I'm not sure if expanding the device is the best kind of stimulus that it can give to the cells. What's happening in our device is just the flow, the shear stress on the cells is enough to give them the stimulus for forming this two-dimensional structure. Thank you.
So just to clarify on that, so you don't have peristaltic motions.
So we do have some of our designs with the side chambers, and we can apply vacuum and deform them. We've done that, but we didn't find any benefit in doing that, and we stopped because it was having complexity to the system that we are not looking into.
Okay. Just one last question for myself. So I've seen a lot of papers with, culturing CACO2, and some say, this whole, I guess, culturing the CACO2, you have shear stress effects, and some say they don't. So what is your opinion on that? I just want to know, like, does shear stress affect the culturing, or?
I think it does, because I've probably read the same papers that you did.
Sure.
And what they show is that when you add shear to the Keiko2 cells, they kind of differentiate into pretty much all kinds of cells in the gut. It's a little bit hard to believe, isn't it? But that's what they show.
Yeah.
So if you do it in static cultures, what happens is that they only form enterocytes.
Okay.
So,
And I guess related to that, so do you think like enzymatic activity and things like that, that would be affected as well, right?
possibly, yes, I would say. I would think so, because the enterocytes will express enzymes that other cells will use.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Miguel.
Thank you very much.
Give another hand.